All right, so we were talking about resentment, right? Where does the word resentment come from? We're going to have a little education lesson, guys. Resentment comes from French word, which came from a Latin word, which came from a Greek word. The French word was resentire. You can trace it right back to the Greek. Re means again. Sentir means to feel. So resentment means to re-feel. We always associate resentment with anger. But a resentment is any time you're re-feeling. What your brain does is it attaches an emotion to a memory, right? Any parent here knows that when the first time your little baby smiles at you, that memory, it evokes a feeling of love and compassion. It's natural. It just comes at you. There's a huge emotional charge to that memory. Alcoholics, we tend to have an emotional charge to something that happened that wasn't the way we wanted it to. So we're angry about some action. There's a huge emotional attachment. We think of that person or that event, and bang, here comes the emotion with it. Right? It can also be, anybody ever made a mistake? And every time they think of that mistake, you're ashamed by the fact that you made some mistake. And it was just a natural human thing. You said the wrong word, and all of a sudden the shame comes running back in. That's a resentment. It's not an anger resentment, it's a shame resentment. Right? Guilt can happen that way. You can feel terribly guilty about something. My oldest son, Duke, when he was little, he had his first set of sneakers. I'll never forget this. Brand new, he was just learning to walk, and he was kind of in that unstable phase. He was walking past the dog's bowl, and the dog eats kibbles, little round kibbles. And one foot stepped on a kibble, and the other foot it was stuck to the ground with his brand new sneakers. And he did this funny split, and he broke his femur, broke his leg. He was about 2.5 years old. He had to be in a body cast. From the underarms all the way down to the tips of his toes, he was in a cast. He was 2.5 years old. That means diapers. You ever try to change a diaper when the kid's in a body cast and you have a little slit and trying to keep him clean? Huge problem. So my wife and I made this decision. We're not going to let him play around like that. We're not going to risk him ever getting hurt because he's our little baby. We're going to take care of him so he can only play on soft things, not the hard floor. So he can play on the couch or he can play on the bed. What the doctor never told me was the number one chance of you breaking your leg, your femur bone, is when your foot gets caught in the covers or soft material and the other one doesn't. So we're upstairs, and he's playing on the bed in the morning like he always does, and he's jumping up and down on the beds. And I said, "Hey, buddy, it's time to go." And I reached my arms out like this, leaning way out over the bed. And at this time, he was 3.5. And he does this, and he jumps like he normally does. But he doesn't jump high enough to get his feet off the bed, and the one leg stays there, and as he hit my hands, I couldn't hold him. Sick sound when you hear that bone snap. For the second time. You can see it's still a resentment for me. I feel guilt by that. What did I do wrong? Nothing. Mechanical advantage, I was out like this, trying to hold his little body weight. I couldn't do it. But to me, I failed as his father. I'm supposed to protect him. That resentment can get you drunk just as easy as an anger resentment. I've made amends to him for that. But you can see just the thought of that event still evokes tremendous emotion with me. But what it doesn't bring up is guilt. Because I'm clear. I've gone to him and he's like, "Oh, Dad, I was being a little kid. I was stupid. You didn't do anything wrong. You forgave me." The key to resentment is forgiveness. Let me say that again. The key to resentment is forgiveness. You gotta have it. There's more to it. Remember, we just talked about it's not just anger. It's any time you have an emotional charge to a thought. Guilt, shame, remorse, expectation is another time you get resentful. Ever been a little kid and you can't wait till Dad comes home? You can't wait. Dad's going to come home. Dad's going to come home. He's going to be home at 3 o'clock. And Dad's going to be home at 3 o'clock. And Dad didn't show up at 3 o'clock because he's at the bar drinking. You're not angry at Dad for being at the bar drinking. Why are you angry? Because you had an expectation. And your expectation was violated. Expectations are a reservation for a resentment. Every time you make a mistake, just like I just told you about with my son, resentments can also apply to good emotions too. As alcoholics, we don't ever remember the good euphoria of drinking, right? It's all we remember. On a hot day, how do we remember the cool one? I remember how good a nice cold beer tastes with a little dribble of sweat down the side of the bottle. Why is it we remember the cold one going down and we never remember the hot one coming back up? Right? What tools do you have to get rid of resentment? It's interesting. We got a 4-column inventory for resentment, right? This is the one we think about when we think about resentment. That's why alcoholics think about anger when they think about resentment. We go through a 4-column inventory, right? Right out of the book. Most folks tend to focus on column 3 because in the example, there's 3 columns in the example. The 4th column is only in a description that comes 2 pages later, right? Here's a little history. When they wrote the big book, they got long-winded because they were going to mail the big book around the world. You got to remember, Bill Wilson, Dr. Bob, Abby Thatcher, Bill Dotson, alcoholic number 3, they didn't write inventory. I hate to break that to you. They did verbal. Abby went to Bill in the hospital, and he did his inventory verbally, right? But they couldn't say you need to talk to another alcoholic because they're going to mail this book around the world to somebody that may not have another alcoholic in his presence, and he's got to be able to get sober. So they borrowed from religion. There's something called the Sacrament of Penance, which the Catholic priests and the Episcopalians, they write out inventory. So they borrowed that concept of writing inventory because it was what they were doing in the Oxford group. The Oxford group was doing it verbally. So they said, well, this will work just as fine. Just have them write it down and they can tell it to somebody. There's got to be a priest or a minister or something, a shaman. Somebody can hear this inventory, so we'll get the exact same effect. Does that make sense? So they wrote out, and Bill was very long-winded, and he wrote hundreds, well, we think it was hundreds of pages of inventory on the resentment inventory. How to do it. Columns gave all kinds of examples. They take the manuscript to Tom Usel, who was a famous editor. They said, would you edit this book? He got into the 4-step section. He's like, wow, there's just way too much here on this inventory. They were trying to describe how you do a verbal inventory only on writing. Way too much. So he took an example, the 3-column inventory, took the rest of the pages and took it out of the book and just connected it with a verbal paragraph for the 4th column. They were in Linden, New Jersey in the big office. Hank Parkhurst got really upset. He got in a fight with Bill. He went back out. They lost that office space, so they moved to New York to a much smaller office space. They weren't thinking about history and archives. Wouldn't we love to have those writings? They threw it in the dumpster when they moved. Or they said, that's part of the book we don't want. We lost a huge section of inventory. At least 100 pages. Some historians say it was multiple hundreds of pages. That's why it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the big book, but I digress. Alcoholics, we tend to stop at the 3rd column. Why was I upset? What happened? Right? I'm upset at who? Person, institution, principle. Why am I angry? What they did to me, and the 7 areas that it can affect. And we stop. Stop right there because it's all about us, right? Then, if you had a good enough sponsor who taught you about 4-column inventory, you're supposed to look at where was I selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. The problem is, if the other person created any harm to you when you were creating your harm to them, you'll co-sign some of the harm. Anybody hear the expression of my part? I got to look at my part in this thing? Guess what? It's all your part. Whatever they did is none of your damn business. We're looking at, it's our inventory. We're looking at 100% of our inventory. There's no other part. It is one part. So how do you get there? 3-column inventory. We're looking for freedom. It's possible. Right? What's going to get us free is forgiveness. The really cool thing is between column 3 and column 4, there's this whole forgiveness prayer. It's a 12-part prayer, and we're going to go over that. But first, let me explain to you who Emmett Fox was. Emmett Fox was an evangelist. He was in Bill Wilson's time. He would go to Madison Square Garden, which was the biggest arena in New York City. He would sell at Madison Square Garden. One of the early members of Alcoholics Anonymous was dating Emmett Fox's secretary. And so they would schmooze up to her, and she'd get him free tickets, and all the drunks would go down and listen to Emmett Fox. And there's a lot of Emmett Fox quotes directly from Emmett Fox that Bill Wilson plagiarized in our big book. But one of the things that Emmett Fox wrote, which was really cool, he says, it's a cosmic truth that it takes 2 to make a prisoner, the prisoner and the jailer. There's no such thing as being a prisoner on one's own account. Moreover, the jailer is as much a prisoner as his charge. They're both in the jail. When you hold resentment against anyone, you are bound to that person by a mental chain. You are tied by a cosmic tie to the thing that you hate. The one person perhaps in the whole world whom you dislike is the very one to whom you're attaching yourself by a hook that is stronger than steel. Here's the problem. If we're still emotionally charged, when we try to look at our part, as people say, when you're trying to look at your harms that you caused, and you're still emotionally charged, your mind, it's the tool we use our entire life. It's the same mental thing that said, this time it's not going to put me back on the bar stool. That same mindset that works for us, we will minimize the damage that we did, and we won't see our whole part of what we caused. I'll only see 80% of what I caused, because in my mind I'll be rationalizing and say, well, they did this to me, and so that explains why I did this to them. Doesn't cut it. How do I get clear vision of 100% of what I did? I'll show you. We just talked about that. You use forgiveness to break the emotional charge. Once there's emotional forgiveness, there's no more charge, and your 100% of what you caused, the harm you caused, just comes flooding in on top of you, and you will own every inch of it gladly, because there's no emotion attached to it. It's just fact. I didn't catch my son. He broke his leg. We took him to a fantastic doctor, and he's fixed. He's better than he ever would have been. It's just the way it is. Right? Till we forgive and get rid of the emotional charge, we can't see our part clearly. We minimize. Interesting. Underneath the lack of forgiveness is a fear. Remember, I talked about it already. We want grace for ourselves, and we want justice for everybody else. What's causing that? We're afraid that if I forgive that SOB who did this terrible thing to me, they're not going to get their justice, and I want them to get their justice. That fear that they're going to get away without having to pay the emotional price, I don't get my pound of flesh, it forces me to hold on to the resentment. Right? So now what? Let's recognize some of the emotional facts of life. Life hurts, and we medicate to make the pain go away, to numb it. Did you ever drink so you could fill in the blank? I need a drink so I can talk to a girl. I need a drink to make this pain go away. I need a lot of people. I need a drink before I feel comfortable being naked, seen naked, so I can have sex with somebody. Fill in the blank with 1,000 different things. Life, it's to make the pain of life go away, so we can try to make it more pleasurable. Unless we deal with it properly, hurt accumulates. I call it spiritual plaque. It builds up on you. You take a little harm here and a little harm there, and you're fine. A little more harm. Oh, I can handle that. A little more harm. Before you know it, you're weighed down with so much harm, you can't handle it all. It's a multiplication factor. Time does not heal all wounds. It's a lie. Wounds will stagnate. Physically, time will heal the wounds. If I punch you in the face, your face will heal. The bruise will go away. The emotions will be there until you forgive. Right? Emotions get worse due to the hurts accumulating and festering. Love that word, festering. Because that's truly what happens. It festers. The incident in the past, the judgment of our ego keeps the pain alive to the present. I was doing a workshop in New York in 2000 or 2001. And there was a woman who got madder than hell. And she says, I was raped, and that son of a... And she went off and off and off. She says, what did I do? He raped me. And I stopped and I said, excuse me, ma'am. When did he rape you? And it was like 15 years prior. And I said, that's absolutely abhorrent. I'm so sorry for you that horrendous event happened. You did nothing to cause that event. It was not your fault in the slightest. But it was 15 years ago. You have been raping yourself for 15 years because you won't forgive, and you've been carrying that to today. She hooked up with some women in that meeting, in that conference. She did a fifth step on that. She forgave, and she was free that weekend because of forgiveness. Accumulated pain compromises mental health, emotional health, relational health, and spiritual health. Remember I said alcoholism is the sickest disease out there? It affects every area of your life. We all deal with pain in our own way, some right, some wrong. Forgiveness, or we want the offender to know how much they hurt us. That's the justice that we're looking for. Why is it we expect grace for ourselves and justice for the offender? To claim it's spiritual hypocrisy on our part. Why is it that we want forgiveness and grace, but we're not willing to offer it? So we're still looking for an easier, softer way. What a great description of an alcoholic. Easier, softer way. Guess what? Forgiveness is the easier, softer way. The only way to heal the hurt is to resolve it, is to turn to God with it. Guilt, shame are dissolved by God's forgiveness and compassion. Greek. I know I keep going back to the Greek, but it's so cool when you can actually see what it means. It's Ephesus in the Greek. It literally means to let go of. There was a great guy who wrote a book called Drop the Rock. He was a recovered person. It's like trying to swim across the river with a rock. And the guy's drowning, and you're like, drop the rock. No, I got to get to the other side. You're drowning. Drop the rock. No, he's going under. He comes back up, and he's kicking. He's starting to get fatigued. They're like, drop the rock. You don't understand what that son of a did to me. Drop the rock. He goes under again. A couple seconds, he pops back up. Drop the rock. I need help. Throw me a line. I'm trying to drop the rock. He drops the rock. He swims to the other side, and he's free. That's the description of us. Drop the rock. So what do? After we write out the first 3 columns, we have to write out a prayer. Column 1 is person, institution, or principles. For every person in column 1, I have my guys write out a forgiveness prayer. Don't ask me how it works, because I can't explain it any better than this. There's a connection. The problem resides in our mind, right? Our mind is in control. If I try to think the prayer through, I'm trying to solve the problem with the problem. But when I write the prayer, it goes from my head, through my heart, out my arm onto the paper, and what comes out is spiritual, because it went through my heart to get out there. I can't describe it any other way. I can be really angry and try to say a prayer of forgiveness, and I don't end up with freedom. I write the exact same words that I was thinking onto a piece of paper, and I read it, and I go, whoa, that's good stuff. Where'd that come from? Because the Holy Spirit resides deep down in each and every man, woman, and child, right? According to our book. That's where it goes. So we have to stop on the way to the path to freedom. Has to go through our heart to get there. Why write it out? Because the book says to write it out. They knew what they were talking. The main alcoholic problem centers in his mind. There's a connection between the heart and the pencil. I always say there's magic between pen and paper. Don't ask me why. Every written inventory is a written inventory for that reason. You got to write it out. And no, new technology people, typing it doesn't count. I literally write out my sex ideal. I write out my prayers, and then I type them into the computer so that I can have them and I can print them or do whatever, because my handwriting is terrible. You've got to write it out. Personal experience. Here's where it comes from, the forgiveness prayer. This was our course. We realized that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms, column 2, and the way these disturbed us, column 3, they, like ourselves, were sick too. We asked God, here's why I call it a forgiveness prayer, because we're asking God to help us show them, there's the vision, right? The same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When this person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man, how can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry, thy will be done. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chances of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Here's the 12 pieces. Tolerance, pity, patience, cheerfulness, friend, helpful, God save me from being angry, thy will be done, retaliation, argument, kindly, tolerant view. There they are. Let's talk about them. You'll notice I pointed out where they come from. I wanted to show them to you first. They're right here. You see right there about the 4th line down? Tolerance, pity, patience, cheerfulness, friend. I just pulled them right out of the paragraph so you can see where they are. And all this is in your guide. Tolerance. Tolerance is the behavior, right? We don't like whatever it was that they were doing, whether they raped us or whether they're snubbing us or whether they're obnoxious to us. Whatever that behavior is, we don't like the behavior. So we're going to ask God, please, when they do this, help me to tolerate it, whatever it happens to be. Pity. Tender and sometimes contemptuous sorrow, empathy. We realize that they're sick people. They're not doing it to be mean to us. They're doing it because they're broken. Same way that you're broken. You didn't ask to be an alcoholic, but you are. You're just as broken. They're just as broken. They just happen to be broken with whatever that behavior is, as you're broken with your alcoholism. Patience. Endurance under difficult circumstances, which can mean persevering in the face of delay. Oh, come on, honey. We're always late. Would you please hurry up just for me? Can you be on time today? Where'd that come from? In the face of delay, provocation, or acting on annoyance, anger in a negative way. Cheerfulness. Having a happy disposition and good spirits. And we need to be a positive attitude. And it doesn't mean putting on a happy face with scorn and disdain in our voice, because we're just being happy. I'm happy. No, it means truly connecting with your heart and being happy. Okay, I can wait. Kicking back and relax. Just relax. I've been doing it this whole weekend. Turkey. I'm frustrating the hell out of them. Dave, where do you want to eat? I don't care. I'm easy and I'm cheap. I'm just relaxed. I'm cheerful. Friend. Important. We treat them as enemies. They hurt me, and I want my pound of flesh, you SOB. I now have to change. I want to do them to be my friend. With your friend, even though they're an SOB, you give them grace. Well, they're a friend of mine. Yeah, they're an idiot sometimes, but I put up with it. That's what we're looking for. Helpful. Being of service to God. Jobs, folks. Jobs are not for money. To say it again, your job is not for money, according to our literature. A job is an opportunity for service. What are you doing to make the world a better place because you're in it and you're sober? You happen to be doing this wonderful job. I fly airplanes. I love to fly airplanes. It's spiritual. I don't tell them, but I do it for free because I love to do it. They just happen to pay me for it. But I'm a steward of God's money. It's His money, not mine. I'm there for service. So when I have a passenger who's missing their flight and they're really pissed off and they're yelling and screaming, I'm like, hey, how you doing? What can I do to help you? I'm there to calm the waters. I'm there to be of service. Make sense? God saved me from being angry. One's psychological interpretation of having been offended, wronged, or denied, and a tendency to undo that by retaliation. Love that definition. Help me, God. Help me not to do something stupid. Thy will be done. To agree to do the will of God, no matter what the consequence to our ego. Ooh, I love that word, ego. Retaliation, to take revenge with a harmful action against the person, group in response to a grievance, being it real or perceived. The Big Book often talks about that. It says whether the harm is real or you just perceived it as being real, to you, your emotional charge, it was real. They could have meant nothing by it, could not even have done it. But in your mind, between your ears, it's going to kill you unless you get rid of it. Real or perceived. Argument, an oral disagreement, verbal opposition, contention, or altercation. Kindly, a sympathetic attitude towards others and a kind willingness to do good. Tolerant view, to be tolerant or patient in the face of provocation. Marked by forbearance, endurance, to view them as sick, not as bad, to try to see them as God sees them with compassion. There's the list again. Did you happen to notice something, guys? Number 1 was tolerant, and number 12 was tolerant view. What's the difference? What I like to use is an explanation, right? I love this explanation. We all have this friend, the nose picker, right? You got this friend and he's a friend of yours, but they're always picking their damn nose. They're pick. You're talking to them and they're like, don't pick your nose in front of me. But you tolerate it because they're a friend of yours. It's a really obnoxious, disgusting behavior, but you tolerate it, right? But when I think of my friend, that exact friend, I don't think of him as a sick child of God. I think of him as a nose picker, right? I need to change my view. I need to tolerate the behavior because he's going to continue to pick his nose, but my view has to change. I can't think of him as a nose picker. I think the poor guy is broken. It just completely changes. It drains that emotional charge right out. Just like me, he's broken in some way. You know, I have to have love in my heart for him. See the difference? Big difference. Tolerance is the behavior. Tolerant view is how you see them. It's a living child of God. Forgiveness prayer. To work with the forgiveness prayer, the first thing you have to do is be aware that you have this issue going on. How do you know what you don't know? If you don't know it's even there, that it's a block to you, you're dead in the water. All right? And it's your ego that's going to try to hide it from you. You know, my sponsor Carl used to always say that everything after but is bullshit. You know? But you don't understand. They did such and such, but you don't understand. Everything after but is bullshit. No, I do understand. Forgive them. But they did such and such to me. They did such and such to me. Everything after but is bullshit. And he was so spot on with that. Your excuse is crap. It's what's your part, 100% you were wrong. Forgive them. Go to love. Go to God. Recognize that the harm is in the past, long ago, and it's my ego that's keeping it alive. Unless they just did it 2 seconds ago, it's not a resentment because it's current. Resentare, refeel. I have to be refeeling from a thought. It's an emotionally charged thought of something occurring in the past. It's chaining me to that past emotion. Our judgment and memories of the past are causing the pain, not the offender. Did you catch that? Right? It's my judgment of their actions and the memory of the pain that's causing me the pain. Who's doing that to me? Me. They did it years ago. Then they were guilty. Now I'm doing it to me because I'm rebringing it up over and over and over again. Don't identify with the feelings. See them from the third person. Disconnect from them. Yeah, my son broke his leg. If I didn't catch him, if I just didn't catch him, I'm identifying with the feeling. Me. I made a mistake. If I was a better parent, I would have gone around the bed and caught him over there. There's 1,000 different outcomes, right? I can't identify it. I have to look at it from a third person. And here's a dad, loves his kid, trying to catch him, made a mistake, everybody's wrong. Let's fix the problem and move on. See the difference? Without any expectations of restorative justice. We talked about that till you write out the prayer and watch your ego lose its emotional charge, and you're going to end up happy. Right? We ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective action should be taken. Remember that? We talked about that? That's what that's about. Are you serious about freedom? How free do you want to be? My dead friend Mark Houston used to say it all the time. You'd call him up with a problem, and he'd say, oh, whatever it is, and he'd say, Dave, how free do you want to be? You know? You want to be free? Let it go. Move on. By the finish of the written prayer, you should already be free. It's my personal experience. When I write this out and I really get in the zone, and I'm ready to finally get rid of this, drop the rock, finally ready to be done with this resentment, and I'm going to be forgiven, and I write this prayer out and I get it done, 99% of the time, by the time that prayer is finished, there's love in my heart, and it's neutral. There's no more emotional charge. It's just a thing that happened in the past. All right? Should be no charge left. What happens if you get done with the prayer and there's still a charge? Here's the deal. You add it to your morning prayer meditation. Right? A lot of people like to focus on that story from the 3rd edition where you're taking the prayer for 2 weeks or whatever it is. Yeah. What did the guys from the 1st edition and the 2nd edition do before that person wrote that story? This. They were already doing that practice. That person was describing a practice that the Oxford groupers have been doing from the very beginning. You know? Bring it in prayer meditation. So what happens after a couple days? With me, I use a week. At the end of a week, if you've been saying that prayer every single day and there's still an emotional charge, guess what? It's not that resentment that's making the emotional charge. You've missed a resentment. Look for another resentment with that person. Same person, maybe even the same event. Right? It could be another person. Maybe 2 people did something to you. And you're trying to forgive this person. You got to bring the other person in because there's still an emotional charge attached somewhere in that memory. Go find out what you've missed and write a prayer for that, and it'll go away. Make sense? Daily forgiveness. 3 instructions. Resentment is the only topic in the big book that they give us 3 separate instructions for how to work with resentment. And most people have never heard this piece. Why do you think that is? Because resentment destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Right out of our book. It's the number 1 offender. Destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Look at this sentence. From resentment stems how many forms? All forms of spiritual disease. I had a real hard time with that because I was thinking, not all my spiritual disease stems from anger. I didn't understand the word resentment. That's why I explained what resentment is. It can be guilt, it can be shame, it can be worry, it can be remorse, it can be attachment, it can be all these different emotions, and alcoholics don't know their emotions. All we know is anger or joy. That is, sometimes we have joy. It's very fleeting, but we can understand joy. Everything in between is gray. It's just anger in one form or another. When we first come in, once you had a spiritual awakening, you understand emotions. Spiritual malady is overcome. We straighten out mentally and physically. Right out of the book. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Why is it a written inventory? Because it says, write it on paper. That's why. Take it up with Bill if you got a problem with it. Here's our 3 resentment instructions. We already talked about it. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. You write out a 4-column inventory, right out of the book. Who in column 1, why you're angry in column 2, what it affects, column 3. You write out the 12-part forgiveness prayer. Now that there's no emotional charge, now you can look at your 4th column. Where was I resentful, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Go to page, on the behind the cover page of your guide right now. Here's what I call a short form. It is a resentment inventory form that I put together years and years ago. Okay? Right out of the book. Column 1, person, institution, or principle. Column 2, why you are angry. The next two lines are not out of the big book. This is Dave Fredrickson's experience. It has to be very specific, and it has to be the truth. Alcoholics are masters at using 10% truth and throwing in a whole bunch of bullcrap. I call it the mushroom theory. You put a little kernel of truth and cover it over with crap. And it sounds plausible, so people try to buy into it. For example, one of my own inventories. My dad always beat me. Was in column 2. Dad was column 1. He always beat me. And my sponsor looked at me and said, "So your dad's in prison?" I said, "No, my dad's not. We're talking about dad's in prison." He said, "Well, if he always beat you, he'd be in prison." When my dad beat me, that's a true statement. The 5 times in my life growing up when he beat the crap out of me, that's a true statement. It has to be specific and to the truth. Always and never do not belong in column 2. I will call you on it every single time if you give me an always or a never. There's no such thing as always and never in column 2 of our heart. Column 3, the 7 areas of self that can be forgiven. And you'll notice there's a little column there that says prayers. That's between column 3 and column 4 is the forgiveness prayer. That's where it falls in on the sheet. Then column 4 is selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. So you now have a resentment inventory sheet. Before you write it, Xerox it if you want to use it. Use it, don't use it, your call, I don't care. It's your life. Look at that, it just came up on the screen. So our troubles, we think, are basically of your own making. How free do you want to be? Here comes our second instruction. Remember we talked about this. We watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. We get into the 4-part instructions at that point as we're going through our day. You watch when these crop up. We ask God at once to remove it. We discuss it immediately. We make amends quickly, and we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone help. I used the example of the woman at 7-Eleven, right? That's the second kind of resentment inventory. The first kind is when you're doing your formal inventory process. You're going through and you're writing 4-column inventory with your sponsor. I do that twice a year. Every January, every June. I start at step 1. I go through step 12 just as a formal exercise right out of our literature. I go in for annual or biannual house cleaning. I write this kind of inventory. The daily inventory, when I'm catching it as I'm going through my day, I don't have time to stop. I'm at work. I don't have time to write out a 4-column inventory on the spot. I use this one in the middle of my day. I ask God at once to remove it. It's not that old. It just happened. I can take care of this right away. That's why it's our second event, right? Resolute, determined, a decided purpose, firm or perseverance. We take selfless action to get out of ourselves, to help somebody else. It'll unlock the resentment from you every time. Then we give in 3 instructions. Here comes the third one. From 119. When resentful thoughts come, try to pause and count your blessings. After all, alcohol is no longer a problem. I've had more people challenge me of the concept of a gratitude list. Guess where the gratitude list comes from? Right there. Doesn't say gratitude list, but what are they saying? Pause and count your blessings? All right, you got me. I'll give you that one. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper, right? So you write a gratitude list, a written list. My wife is doing it as a spiritual exercise. She's a black belt Al-Anon. She read a book about 1,000 blessings or something, where she was trying to get to 1,000 things that she was grateful for. It took her about 3 weeks to get 1,000, and she just kept right on going. She's just keeping right on going. It's amazing. Every day she writes gratitude things. And what's really cool is every once in a while she'll stop, and she'll say, "Hey, honey, come here. Look at this." She'll go back 2 or 3 months ago, and she'll say, "David fixed the dishwasher. David did something there. David did something there." Those little things that every day that they don't get found out, when she figures it out, guess where it goes? On the gratitude list. And I tell you. Not that I count. Anyway, I still need some more healing. We watch. It requires awareness to be aware of your feelings. If you're going through life, head down, I'm going to do what I have to do because I want to do it, you will never get to this piece. You will stay angry and resentful the entire time. Pause. Meditate. Count your blessings. Oops. I don't know if I can go back. Forgiveness. Why do you want to forgive? It feels good to forgive. You felt like crap. You had this person in prison, but you were in prison with them. You were emotionally chained to them, and all of a sudden you forgive, and guess what? You kind of go, I'm so glad I don't have that weight on my back anymore. I don't even have to think about him. I have this sponsee that drives me bonkers. He hasn't called me in 5 days. It is so cool, you know? It's just absolutely wonderful. It's a weight off my shoulders. That's why you want to forgive. It's a long story. It'd be gossip if I told it to you. Lord's Prayer. Say it almost every meeting. Forgive us, as we forgive those who trespass against us. We always want the grace, but we don't want to forgive those who trespass against us. It's conditional. If you're a Christian and you're saying that prayer that Jesus taught, guess what? If you want His forgiveness, it is not optional. You must forgive your brother, right? If you show up at the altar to pray, what does it say? Why are you concerned about the speck in your brother's eye when you got a log in your own eye? Go make peace with your brother and then come talk to me. It's so clear. It's throughout the Bible. It's in virtually every single religion. And let me address that point since I'm talking about it. Every single religion on the planet, I don't care if it's shamanism, if it's walking the red road, if it's Christianity, if it's Buddhism, if it's every single one of them, there's one thing, and it's the same thing as our big book. We're separated from God, and He wants us back. That's the deal. But like I said before, He will not come where He has not been invited. The seekers are the ones that survive in recovery. Forgiveness breaks the psychic chains that connects you to the person. Unforgiveness keeps us in the shadows of our ego. Think about that statement. You want to do a meditation? Meditate on the shadow of your ego. And what does the big book say? It says we shine the sunlight of the Spirit in there. Darkness. All you need is a little bit of love light in there. And I did a love light meditation to my buddy JR and his wife Carlene. She's a Black Belt Al-Anon. He's a big book thumper. They're doing their first joint big book study this weekend. Today. I'm so excited. And it's a joint function, AA and Al-Anon together, working with our original textbook, carrying the message. And so I did a meditation, and I sent some love light out to him. I just got that warm feeling of love in there, and I just projected it to him. Right? And I sent him a text, said, love light coming your way. I also sent it to one of my guys his son has got some issues, and he's going through some trouble with that. And he sent me back a text almost immediately. He said, I could feel somebody was praying for me. Thank you. He got the love light. Forgiveness allows us to love again. It connects us with the Spirit of God and His sense of presence in our life. Forgiveness is tough on the ego, for sure, but the resultant love is infinitely more valuable than any pleasure your ego gets from demanding justice for the pain that was caused. That is a powerful, truthful statement. You want to get free? How free do you want to be? If we feel we're too bad for God to grace us, that's spiritual arrogance. No one has sunk too low for forgiveness. I don't care what you did. You can be forgiven. Every religion teaches it, you can be forgiven. I don't care what it is. That's your ego telling you, I'm the worst of the worst. And we're so great at it. We're the only group on the planet that tries to one up, you got 2, I got 3 DWIs. No, I'm sicker than you. I got 4 DWIs, right? We're also the only group on the planet, when we get to our character defects, and you're sitting there working with a new guy and you say, okay, you ready to have God remove these character defects? What does he always say? Let me think about that for a minute. How free do you want to be? He's got to actually think about, do you want to get rid of all the bad things in your life and let God run the show? He's got to say, no, let me think about that. We're twisted. Our minds are just broken that way. Hatred destroys the hater. God is different in nature and degree. God's love, forgiveness, grace, and mercy. There's a description that resentment is like acid. It destroys the container that holds it. Why would you want to hold on to resentment? Get rid of it. Get free. Anybody know who Dag Hammarskjöld is? He was a ambassador to the UN. Brilliant guy. He wrote this: forgiveness is the answer to the child's dream of a miracle, by which that which is broken is made whole again, what is soiled is again made clean. Forgiveness. Healing. Healing isn't just an act of God, it's a partnership between us and God. If you want to be healed, you have to form the partnership. You cannot do this work on your own. It will not work. God only does the healing in our lives with our cooperation. It's our responsibility to do what is necessary for us to get healed so we can grow again. If we don't change, the wound becomes who we are, and we assume its identity will be frozen in it. Remember that story I told you about the woman who'd been raped? Her whole identity was as a rape victim. She had to change her entire identity. That's very painful for the ego. I don't know if I told you guys this, but I told the guys last night, I slipped on ice over in London on black ice and broke my back. And because of that, my left leg doesn't work right, and I'm no longer an airline pilot. My identity was I was a pilot. That's something that you did, Dave. You flew airplanes. That's the way you earned income for your family. Now I'm a chaplain for my local police department. You know, my identity is not in what I do. I am a loving child of God and I am a servant. I'm a spiritual warrior for God as I understand Him. That's my true identity. Not in these harms that are in my life or things that I think are bad. It's one of the greatest gifts that ever happened. I got a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old at home. Do you know how precious it is to be home every single day pouring into those two young men's lives? If I was flying airplanes, I'd be gone 3-4 days at a clip. All hell would be breaking loose at home. And I'm sitting there complaining like something bad happened to me? Not this guy. If you'll do what you can do, He'll do what you can't do. A lot of truth to that. It starts by being sick and tired of being sick and tired. You have to have the gift of desperation. Healing isn't an event, it's a lifestyle. AA is not something we do, it's a way of life. Hurts tend to freeze us at the stage of life where they occurred. Healing allows us to grow again. If anybody that started drinking and drugging when they were a teenager, you come in this room, you could be 45 years old, and you're still stuck at an emotional age of a teenager because you were frozen in time because all the hurts and the problems you brought on yourself. All right? God doesn't want to just heal you. He wants to help you change the way you live. Healing isn't focused on removing our pain. It's focused on redeeming God's purpose for our lives. Did you catch that? Yeah. You heal not so you can get better. You heal so you can be more effective to carry God's will out, whatever that happens to be. I don't care if you're a janitor or you're the CEO of a corporation. I fully expect you to be the best janitor or the best CEO that you can be. And you should be of service to wherever you are going to be, making the world a better place because you're in and you're sober. If you're not doing that, you're just a waste of cytoplasm taking up space on this planet. But I digress. Healing removes that which is blocking us from our true nature and effectiveness for God. Inner vows. We're going to talk about inner vows for a while. These are things like, I will never let you do that to me again. Who's in charge of that? I will never let you. How's God supposed to get in there? You just knocked God out. You disinvited Him to the party. Inner vows. We say these things to ourselves and we think we're getting away with something. That's us trying to control life. You have to forgive and let that stuff go or you will be locked to it. It's stronger than steel. I'll never do or I'll never be like. One of the first things I ever said in my life is I'll never be like my father. I turned out exactly like my father. The apple did not roll far from the tree. He was an airline pilot, I'm an airline pilot. He was in the military, I'm in the military. He was a cop, I was a federal officer. He's an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic. I mean, the parallels are just disgusting. No one will ever do fill in the blank. The vow means that God can't be king over this area, and the vow is against your third step decision. You took the third step decision. You turned your will, what you want, and your life, every area of your life, over to the care of God. You don't get a vote. What you want does not matter. You're working for God today, so sit down, shut up, and keep your feet off the seats. That's the deal. Inner vows cause us to overreact, and we're no longer teachable in this area. This is crucially important, and I'm not being prejudiced here, guys. It's just my experience. Women, pay attention to this. When a man gets near a woman's inner vow, she will absolutely overreact. Most guys will not let you know what their inner vow is, so you won't know that you're stumbled into it except by his reaction. Okay? So whatever that is, let's say you're with a violent man somewhere in your career, and then all of a sudden the first time your husband does that, smacks the table. Sorry about that. Right? That sound is enough to trigger her off, and the reaction will just be off the charts. Why? Because she swore that she would never be in a relationship that was a violent relationship. He didn't lay a finger on her. He just made a loud noise. It threatened her security, and she explodes with reaction because he got near that soft spot. Same thing happens with guys. Women are much more emotional. They emote feelings, and they will let you know. They're not big pussies as guys are. They'll let you know where the soft spots are. Guys, we have to put on the Joe Rocks exterior. I'm a man, you know. But we're just scared little boys hidden behind a rock wall. And if you get near our inner vow, I guarantee you will know you were there. You will have just stumbled into it, and the reaction you will get is as ugly as you will ever hear. Just means we're sick. This makes us healthy and a little crazy in this area. No one can influence you. If you have an inner vow, you've closed that door away from God, and you've disinvited Him, and you're going to be stuck with it until you open it back up. You're touchy and vulnerable for emotional explosions. To break inner vows, you admit them and you write them down. You let somebody else know. You shine the sunlight of the Spirit into the darkness, and the light will take care of it. Interesting concept. You know there's no such thing as darkness? There's only the absence of light. Interesting. There's no such thing as cold. It's the absence of heat. That's the way it's designed. The natural rules of law are that way. We love to hide in darkness. We love to hide parts of us and keep the sunlight of the Spirit out. What we're really keeping out is the only thing that's going to keep us sober, which is the power. Let the power in and watch what dissolves. Everything else dissolves and you'll be free. Remember, forgiveness is pleasurable. It allows you to love again. It brings with it freedom and sunlight of the Spirit. Happiness, peace, love, and a sense of direction are all the fruits of forgiveness. How free do you want to be? Forgiveness breaks the psychic chain connecting you to what you hate. Awareness, watching daily, keeps you free from the return of the unforgiving ego. Every single person in this room, I would highly recommend that you get our history book. It's a boring book. AA Comes of Age, right? It's about all the early history, and if you're not really into history, I eat that stuff up. I enjoy it. Go immediately to the appendices. There's 2 stories that are mandatory reading for all my guys. Absolutely. The first story is Dr. Silkworth in the appendix. It's the Dr. Silkworth story. The next are the stories of a guy by the name of Dr. Harry Tiebout, Tiebout. He's the guy that when Bill Wilson got way off the reservation, when he had about 10 years and he was really dry and he was doing all kinds of things he shouldn't be doing, and I don't need to go into all that stuff here. Father Ed Dowling, Catholic priest, came into his life and sat him down and they did some inventory work together. And Bill got free. And Harry Tiebout was affecting him. And Harry Tiebout spent the rest of his career, he was a psychiatrist at a place called High Watch Farms up in Connecticut. And he basically wrote these essays, and they're in our book, our history book. And he describes the resurgence of the alcoholic ego and how that plays into whether you're going to drink again. Mandatory reading, phenomenal stuff. So if nothing else, just go back to the back of that book and read those 2 pieces. You'll find so much truth in it, it'll amaze you. Never identify with the feelings. We talked about that. I'm going to step off course for just a second because there's a wonderful parable up at the Wilson House where Bill Wilson was born. It's now an AA nonprofit organization. And AAs come from all over the world and they volunteer their service, and it's run by AAs, and they have these wonderful workshops up there, and it's in East Dorset, Vermont. And the guy that bought the house, he and his wife, were both in recovery. He took his retirement, and he retired, he didn't know what to do with it, and he saw the Wilson house was falling apart. He said, this can't be, this is where Bill Wilson grew up. He bought the house and started this nonprofit foundation. And they have all this stuff going on up there. And he told this parable one day, and I wasn't that familiar with the parable, and I went back and I reread it. And it comes out of the Bible, but we'll have an open mind and just see what it says. It says it from Matthew, and there's 2 places. It's in Matthew and in Luke, so it's in 2 of the Gospels. It says, now when an unclean spirit goes out of a man, it passes through the waterless place and seeks rest, but does not find it. What does that sound like? When an unclean spirit goes out of a man, sound like a 5th step? You write inventory and you get rid of the harms done to others, right? So you get rid of the unclean spirit, it's not part of you anymore. But it left a hole. Keep that in your mind. Then the unclean spirit says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds the hole, the space, unoccupied, swept and put in order. Then it goes in and takes along with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself. And they go in and live there, and the last state, the man becomes worse than the first. If you do this inventory work, and you create that void in your heart, and you do not fill it up with God, that's right, you will be filled not with 1, not with 2, 7 unclean spirits will come into you. What do you think those spirits could be? Drugs and alcohol, hurting yourself, self-destructive, spending money you don't have, shopping, overeating, gambling, thrill-seeking, lust, sex, pornography, work to the detriment of your family. anger, rage, separation, negativity, bigotry, abuse, control. Where do you think I came up with these? Doing inventory work, looking for the unclean spirits that have come back and boomeranged on me because I didn't stay spiritual. I didn't stay connected with God. That's the deal on forgiveness, guys. I beg you. You want to be free? How free do you want to be? Come on the ride. It's a wonderful deal. It only costs you your ego. Kill the ego, forgive somebody, and watch the peace, love, and happiness that invades your life. There's nothing better. Happy, joyous, and free. We're at 3:30. We told you we'd take you to 4. I have more. I'll stay here as long as you guys want until I have to go speak at the 5th tradition meeting tonight. If you guys want to stay around, I'll do a whole other section and we'll go into some even more stuff that'll just blow your mind, just like this first stuff. So if you want, take 5 minutes, come back at 5:30, and we'll rock another one. First one is Dr. Soper in the appendix. Go to the appendix and just start reading and see Dr. Soper and Dr. Harry Tebow. All right, and that's what I should look at? Yes. It comes of age. It's the appendices in the back.
Appendices in the back.
Appendices in the back.
Okay. And look up Tebow and
the first one is Soper, the second one is Tebow.
Okay, cool.
Not a problem.
When I was saying earlier, I went to the gym shark, so Alba House was.
Yep.
Appreciate it, all right?
I'm Nettie. I'm Nettie. How much? I really appreciate it.
I was coming to the same thing.
You were.
I'm actually going to mail that to my husband and let my husband read it.
Yeah, I'm keeping it.
You can go on to this link,
I'm writing your website.
download it, and print it out in PDF. You can send it to him as an email.
Okay, thank you. God bless you.
God bless you. You take care.
Thank you so much.
See, I'm part of Mary Hall. That was
Cool. I'm glad.
I'm glad. I was wondering what's been going on here all week.
That's what this is. We're rocking it.
I wish we could stay through another session, but we have other things of property we got.
I know. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Principle. In my profession, a woman gets a higher priority than a man. Because she's a woman. To fly airplanes. It's inequality. Inequality. Why? Women get preference over men.
Right.
What areas it affects? I wrote this. I couldn't do a forgiveness prayer.
Right, that's what I was asking.
Yeah. No, I don't do a forgiveness prayer, but I can do it on, it's more advanced spiritual work. You can do it on an institution. Because there's people in the institution. You really do it on the people of the institution. But a principle, I haven't been able to figure out how to work with a forgiveness prayer. I've never needed it.
So is this, are you, what about the realization? Because I do the one in the PDA that was forgiven on the top of the fourth column.
I never needed a realization. I already know what the issue is. I'm living it. I'm realizing it.
After this, you realize it.
I realize it in the process. Because I had a problem, now I realize because the problem is no longer there, and I feel the void. It's like, wow, I'm free. That's its realization. I don't want to spend any more time. I want to get to what I own. So it's just on myself living in prayer. I want to face and be rid of. Not face and learn about and have. Yeah, there's a lot of fun in the realization part, but that's not the goal. The goal is to face it and get out of my life and blocking me from that.
So I was taught the realization is to help you see the person as sick and yourself as sick. Like that you would probably never like.
But you are sick. You know that. But in writing the prayer, connecting the emotions of how you're allowing them to be sick, and therefore that's why you're forgiven. The forgiveness prayer is a realization in and of itself. That's the only one I use. Same stuff.
No cutting.
Just a different twist. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thanks a lot. Enjoyed it. Good. I think that last one, the spare one, I think that was in the reading spirit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Every time.
Excellent.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
I know you explained this, but I forgot. What does the numbers mean?
There's page numbers. The first page is a page. That's page 87.
Yeah, but what
That's the
page
first
to
full
what book?
paragraph. What?
The big book.
The big book. They're all big books.
Why? Oh, because there's 4 editions, right?
4 editions.
Okay. Thank you. You
Sure.
did a great
This is
job.
85 years.
Sure.
That would be 85 because it's starting over here.
I absolutely can. If I have a pen.
So it's 85
You got a
here,
pen.
that'd be
Cool.
85 1,
Oh, we're just trying to do
85 3.
No
Right.
problem. Thanks.
But so if you got one that starts at the top of the page, like that would be one.
I totally forgot to do
So if it's 0, it's continued.
When they come back, you do 7.
Yeah.
1 is at the top of the page because these
I
ones.
forgot about it too. Oops.
We get it.
Okay, guys.
And he's got the
Time.
study guide version, which has set up.
Is this it?
Yeah, right there.
You're gonna ready to go with some more stuff?
Yep.
I want to stay, but I'm
You got the link. You can listen to it on the recording. It's on the front page of your guide. You can download it, listen to it. We're talking about Phillips Foods.
How long is it?
I don't know. Probably. I'm going to go fast.
I may have to bug out.
Okay, man. Yep. You got it. Okay, guys, if you're going to stick around, stick around. Otherwise, head out the door. Before you guys go, though, we're self-supporting your own contributions.
Y'all know 4.
Okay.
Because people want to do dinner and
Yeah.
like 4 and 7 o'clock and all that.
Yeah. Guys,
You're involved in that.
we're trying to do self-supporting your own contributions. We told that we're going to give a donation to the hall for letting us use this room. So if you got a buck, throw it in the basket. We'd love to have it. I'm going to pass the basket. Sorry, over there. If you don't have anything, that's okay too. All right? I promised, let's see, get this thing fired up. Last night I promised some people that I would talk about the 4 absolutes, so I feel guilty if I don't get to it. It's Dave's will, not mine. The early Oxford group guys, they didn't have the big book for the first couple of years. The Oxford group didn't have that. What the Oxford group brought to Bill Wilson, Dr. Bob, Baby Thatcher, all the early guys had was something called the 4 absolutes. And there's pamphlets that are still printed by the intergroup, in some of the intergroups up in the Northeast, in Ohio and Indiana and New Jersey. They still print the 4 absolute packet from the intergroup. And the 4 absolutes are absolute honesty, unselfishness, purity, and love. And it's what they used to judge their behavior as whether they're doing God's will or not. That was the test. By being absolutely honest, unselfish, pure, and loving. And I wanted to talk about that real quick. They're the moral standards which our thoughts and actions can be tested to be in harmony with God's will. They're the keys to spiritual life that God wishes us to live. Dr. Bob was quoted in 1948. He said he recalled the 4 absolutes as the only yardsticks A had in the early days before the official 12 steps. Back then, the Oxford group, there was only 6 steps and the 4 absolutes. And they were using them on a regular basis, on a daily basis. He said that he still felt that they held good and could be extremely helpful when he wanted to do the right thing and the answer was not obvious. Remember that? If you're in indecision, you seek God. Well, how do you test and find out whether it's God's will or not? You hold it up against the 4 absolutes. They're the benchmark. Almost always I measure my decisions carefully by the yardstick of the absolutes, and it checks up pretty well with those 4. Then my answer can't be very far out of the way. Honesty is not a policy. It has to be a constant state of mind. Honesty is a way of life. You can't be honest over here and then dishonest over there. It just doesn't work if you're living a spiritual path. We talked about that earlier. The real virtue in honesty lies in a persistent dedication, striving for both with ourselves and others, regulating to the common sense of kindness. Honesty is connected to kindness. You can be very honest, but very unkind. You can hurt people with being rigorously honest. You know, it's one thing if there's somebody says, "Hey, am I doing this behavior?" You can say yes, and you just rip them open with the honesty, cut them open like a ripe watermelon. That is not fair. It's not kind. Absolutely unkind. Or you can stand back and go, "Well, I was just being honest." No, it's got to be tempered with kindness. It's not easy to be absolutely honest with ourselves because our tendency to rationalize. Remember, we suffer from delusion. We cannot differentiate the truth from the false. That's why we need spiritual teachers in our lives. I have spiritual accountability with men in my life. When I've got something that I think is correct, I go to them and say, "Hey, I got this idea. This is what I'm thinking. I took it to God. This is what came to me. What do you guys think?" I open myself up to have some accountability with them. Same thing. If I screw up, I don't just go clean it up. I let somebody else know, "Yeah, I screwed up, and here's what I did. I had to go make amends for this." I want to shine the sunlight of the Spirit in there and make sure that I cleaned it all up. Nobody lies better to me than I do. Every time you took a drink and you, knowing what you did in the past, why could you continue to drink? If every time you drank you got in big trouble, what made you think you could take a drink safely this time? Because you lie to yourself better than anybody in the whole planet. There's two different kinds of lies. Lies of commission. That's overtly telling a lie. We know we're telling a lie and we just do it anyway. Or stealing. We actually take something from somebody. That's an act of commission. We're actually doing it. We know we're doing it. We're awake and aware to it. And then there's the lies of omission, and I talked about that earlier, telling half-truths. We know what they're asking. They ask us a question, and we answer specifically what they asked, but we violated the Spirit because we knew what they wanted to know, the whole story. We only told them the part of the story because they didn't ask the right kind of question. That's a lie of omission. Willingness to twist a meaning to gain a point, to misquote if the quotation gains an end, to exaggerate to make an impression, the lack of complete truth, misrepresentations in presenting goods for sale. Guess where this comes in? Relationships. I was talking to a guy this weekend, and he said, I got into this relationship, and I was having some issues in this relationship, yada, yada, yada. And I said, well, your relationship's founded on a lie. And he kind of got this look on his face. And he said, what do you mean? I said, your relationship's founded on a lie. I said, you presented this image. We all do that when we first start dating. We present this false image. We want everybody to like us, so we want to put this image out there. The other person falls for the false image. But they gave us a false image too, right? So they own it. No, it's not the way it works. The reason I'm still married today is when I met my bride, I showed her the real me, warts and all, and said, this is who I am. I'm a drunk, I've been sober X amount of time, I got all these character defects, and she didn't run away screaming. It's like, wow, maybe some hope here. First time in my life I'd ever been honest with somebody. But she could see the real me. Every other time, I'm just Mr. Suave, hey, how you doing? But that's not me. That's a complete fake, fabrication, And then once I got what I wanted, I was gone, I'm not that man today. The test for honesty, is it true or is it false? Plain and simple. How would you answer the question if the question was with your sponsor? Unrelenting pursuit of the truth will set you free if you don't quite catch up to it. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. It's one of the biggest half-truths I hear all the time in meetings. You'll listen for it. And anytime anybody uses that quote, what they'll say is, well, it's progress, not perfection. And what they're trying to get you to do is co-sign their negative behavior. They've done something, they're admitting it to the group, and they say, well, I kind of had this half relapse. I didn't drink, but I went out and I got a hooker, and but it's progress, not perfection. And what they're trying to get you to do is co-sign their crap. What you're supposed to say is, where's the spiritual piece of that? Getting a hooker. Where's the spirituality in going and buying a hooker when you know you're married? There's nothing spiritual about that, so don't bring it here and expect me to co-sign it. It's not okay. That behavior is unacceptable. Correct it. Go seek God, do the forgiveness, make the amends, and clean it up. That's what it's supposed to be. Take out the word spiritual and the expression becomes a cosign. A 3-part honesty test. When we're working with somebody, does it need to be said? Question number 1. Does it need to be said now? Question number 2. Does it need to be said now by me? A lot of times we get into other people's business. Does it need to be said? Probably. You see a guy cripple shooting, he's 13 step on a newcomer walking through the door? Does somebody need to say something to him? Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be said. Does it need to be said now? Absolutely. He's trying to kill that person. Whoever that is, they're trying to kill him. You know? Does it need to be said now by me? Maybe not. I know that guy's sponsor is standing right over there. He's got spiritual license. I don't. Why don't I go over there and say, do you see what your guy's doing? Knock that crap off. Get him off of her. She's trying to kill that newcomer. Give her a chance to stay sober. And then over they go. And then the two of them have it out because they have spiritual accountability. Makes sense? I don't need to get in somebody else's business. There's some times where nobody else is around. You're it. It needs to be said now by you. It's a wonderful test. Before you go get in somebody else's business, regardless, ask God. God, do I need to get into this? Use that as the test. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to use the 4 absolutes on my behavior. I'm just not going to go in there just shooting, blasting away. Ask God to help you communicate His love. The guy isn't bad. He's not doing a bad behavior. He's not a bad person trying to get good. He's a sick person trying to get well. And I need to treat him as a loving child of God who's broken. And say, hey, buddy, come here. Can we have a conversation? I don't shame him in front of the newcomer and embarrass them and all the rest of that. You take care of it quietly. Unselfishness. Honesty and unselfishness. Here's number 2. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. Giving rather than getting becomes our guiding principle. These are all right out of the big book. It is the sacrifice of ourselves and our own interest to other people's interests without thought of reward. If we have taken the 3rd step, our life no longer belongs to us. It belongs to God. Your life is none of your own damn business. The test for unselfishness is, am I being self-directed or God-directed in all my affairs? Right? Am I doing this for me or am I doing it for God? This is especially important in relationships. Catch this one. The purpose of marriage or relationship is to kill you. Death of self. You have to have a servant's heart to be in a relationship. And by the way, a relationship is not a twosome, it's a threesome. You bring 25%, your partner brings 25%, the two become one. Get it? Two become one, that's 50%. The other 50% is God in the relationship. How are you supposed to be in that relationship if you're not a servant for God? That way when your husband leaves the toilet seat up and you walk in and sit on the cold porcelain as you fall into the hole, you'll have a little grace, you know? It's a joke, never mind. Bad joke. Have you fallen short in thought, word, and deed? Purity, on to number 3. Freedom from guilt due to innocence of the heart. What were your intentions? I didn't intend for my little boy to get hurt. When I put it up against the test of purity, I was able to forgive myself for what occurred. Knowing what is right means little until we do what is right. You can know what's right and just sit there and keep your mouth shut. And let me digress again into the Christian teachings. This is something that's really kind of cool. Go back to the Garden of Eden according to the Bible. You got Adam and Eve, right? Everybody blames Eve. Eve got convinced by the snake. She takes the apple, she eats the apple, and she hands it to him, and he eats the apple. So everybody says that Eve caused the fall in the garden. God told them both, you're not supposed to eat of the tree. Where was Adam? Standing right next to her. He also said you have dominion over all creatures on the earth, which include everything that slithers and crawls on the ground. So Adam had dominion over the snake. He sees his girlfriend talking to the evil one, and he doesn't say a word. He just stands there and keeps his mouth shut. He knew he wasn't supposed to let her talk to the snake. He also knew he wasn't supposed to stand there and watch her take a piece of the fruit and eat it. He kept his mouth shut. He knew it was right, but he did nothing. He's just as culpable as she was in that particular story. Purity of mind, body, and of purpose. True wisdom is thinking with the final outcome of your actions and their consequences. You have to think about the whole consequence. Yeah, I need to tell you something, I need to tell you something, but I also think of the repercussions. Because if I tell you, it's sort of like if I see that I know he's having an affair on his wife, and I go up to him, his wife, and I tell him, you're going to knock that stuff off, and he goes to make amends and he gets found out, it could have repercussions to her. Or he's having an affair with a married woman, and I say, you need to go make amends, and he calls up the house, and the husband gets on the phone, he has no idea that the wife was cheating, now you got a whole other problem. It's going back into the past, especially with amends. I tell guys, if you're going to reach out to an old girlfriend that you owe an amend to, you get a woman to make the phone call and say, hey, this guy's trying to get in touch with you. Would that be okay if he reaches out? Because you have no idea if she's got a new jealous husband. You can just blow her life apart. because you're on the spiritual quest and you're going to go save yourself and ask for forgiveness, and you roll in a crap grenade into her life and devastate her life because nobody else knew this stuff and you weren't thinking. It's a perfect combination of knowledge and love emanating from the heart. You want to know how to find purity, you got to be in touch with your heart and with God, and it comes naturally. A clean mind and a clean body that embraces clean conduct in business, in work, and in play. In our use of our possessions. Are they your possessions? My house is our house. And it's an open house. I have people over, and I look at my house as an opportunity for God to change people's lives. I have a space in my house that's dedicated for hearing fifth steps, and I could take that space and have a nice, do something else with it. But it's not my house. Is it my car or is it God's car? Do I take people around, I drive them around to meetings, doing of service? Do I volunteer for doing community service with it? Or is it my new truck and I'm not going to throw any dirt in the back of my bed of my truck as, I'm being selfish? There's ways of bringing God into every area of your life if you're open to it. In purity in our relations towards those we're sexually attracted to. And it means purity in not so much as chaste. I mean purity in, are you really there for an honest relationship? I see it in the rooms way too often, especially with single people. That they want to get into a relationship, they want to have sex, but they don't want to have a committed relationship. We're just friends with benefits. Not okay, that's not pure. You're going into an area that is the deepest roots of emotional connection, and it wasn't designed for that. So at least be honest enough with yourself to say, hey, there's a pretty darn good chance I'm going to hurt somebody here. And now let the four absolutes govern your process. Am I being honest? Am I being unselfish? Am I being pure? And most importantly, am I being loving in this process? Or am I just thinking about getting some pleasure for myself at the other person's expense? In your attitude towards friends and acquaintances, purity means not to manipulate, seduce, or pre-program with hidden agendas for anyone. Manipulation is out if you're living a pure life. And you'll catch yourself if you test it against the purity. You'll see that you're a manipulator. We all do it, because that's how we survived as addicts and alcoholics, as we manipulate people. Old behaviors. All right. Have you ever contemplated the peace and contentment that a pure conscience brings? We always say it, if he's got a clear conscience. It automatically means peace, serenity, happiness. But we also think of it in a negative. He doesn't have a clear conscience. It means he's got to do some spiritual house cleaning. You've got to clean that stuff up if you want the peace and the happiness. Sobriety isn't free, folks. You have to pay a price. It means the death of self and the death of ego by seeking God. The joy and the happiness that a pure heart brings. The grace and help that it would bring to others. The freedom which comes from transparency in all areas of your life. Tremendous love that we can share with the world and the people around us. Love which is only available if we use the sunlight of the Spirit and shine it outside of ourselves. As it says in the big book, it talks about the gaunt prospector who's found the limitless load as long as he gives it away. What a great analogy that he's using there. We'd certainly be more determined about our spiritual progress to realize that purity was a requirement. For us to get free, we would be pure all over the place. We'd be willing to give our life our all for God. We'd leave it all on the field of battle. You're in the fight for your life. Literally, you've got a disease that's trying to kill you. How free do you want to be? The problem is we can get away. The sky doesn't fall if all of a sudden you have a little bit of irritation or you miss a meeting and your relapse has begun and your allowance. You can get by. We manage, with a lot of pain in our lives. It's a terrible skill set to be able to survive with. But if you think about it as you're in the fight for your life, are you going to allow that stuff to stick around in your life? I'm not. I want it gone. How free do you want to be? Test of purity is it right or is it wrong? Are my motives pure in all my affairs? Am I entertaining sexual lust in the act or in the thought of acts? Pornography is terrible in purity, as we spoke about earlier. Outside of the cup may look clean, but it's inside of the cup that matters. We get all polished up and we show up and we're like, we're AA angels. Oh, I don't have a single problem. I've been sober for X number of years, yet I just left my home and I just crushed my wife's spirit. My kids are crying. I haven't returned my phone calls. I left work 30 minutes early. I didn't give my boss the work that I said I was going to do for the pay that he's paying me for. But I got it all happening. I'm good. Outside of the cup looks great, but I'm dying inside. I've lived way too many years in Alcoholics Anonymous where I was doing that. It's no fun place to be. Love. God is love. Plain and simple. Every religion talks about God is love. We've all heard this, but do we actually believe it? Interesting question for you. What's your belief system around this? Does this line up with your experience? Some people, particularly people that have a religious background of their childhood where you had negative things happen with penance, or you had certain things you had to do, and where if you did certain things you were considered bad and you had to go cleanse yourself spiritually and all that stuff, their God is a judging God. That's what they were raised with. It's a very judgmental God. And a lot of times they have a hard time seeing God as love. Also, particularly if they had a parent, particularly a father, if their dad was a pain or had an addict and an alcoholic like mine was, when they said you had to believe in a God, my concept of my earthly father was so broken, I wasn't going to trust the heavenly father. That concept was, if he's anything like my dad was, I didn't want anything to do with him. So sometimes you need some spiritual work with somebody to help you break some of those thought patterns that are stuck in there, and they don't line up with your experience. For most folks, it doesn't bear up. A lot of times people profess love when they're actually experiencing attachment. It's not love. It's a sick attachment, and that becomes counterfeit very quickly. And people are left standing there holding the bag going, wait a minute, they said they loved me, I thought they loved me, but really all they wanted me was for some fill in the blank. It's terribly devastating emotionally when that happens. Real love emanates from the heart. You'll feel it in your guts. You just know it. There's no way around it. There's no way to explain it. I can't describe an experience. You got to have the experience for yourself. Look what the book says. For deep down in every woman, man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was part of our makeup. We found the capital of great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. God is inside of you. If this was whiskey, and I picked it up and I started to drink it right now, I would be no further away from God than I am 31 years sober. God is inside of me. God doesn't go anywhere. Who goes somewhere? Me. Your mind leaves. You push away God. God is as close to you as he's ever been. He's right there. Seek him, because he's deep down within you. You got to be out of your mind to find God, because God is in your heart. It comes from the Spirit of God deep down within us, and characterized by selflessness. When we experience pure love, we expect nothing in return. When we live only for our own sobriety, we become beggars in spiritual rags, blind once again with the dust of pride and self. That's pretty powerful. You can't get sober just for you. You get sober to find God so you can be a servant for others. That's the deal. That's the price that has to be paid if you want sobriety. Soon we shall be starving with the hunger of devouring ourselves, perhaps even lose sobriety. Love is give of yourself, and unless we do it, our progress will be lost. Each one owes the gift of this second life of sobriety to every other human being he meets in the ceaseless presence of God, and especially to other alcoholics who still suffer. The 12th step, when it was really originally written, wasn't we carry this message to alcoholics. It was we carry this message to others, especially alcoholics. We need to be out there carrying a message of service to other human beings, and you can stay sober. Whether they're alcoholic or not, I don't care. It doesn't matter. You're being a service for God. That's the key. You're seeking God and being a service for him. Because we're all God's kids. Do not give of oneself brings with it the desolation of a new poverty to the sober alcoholic. It leads to sobriety. If you don't give of yourself, you're going to get drunk. Plain and simple. You'll watch it in your rooms. It'll play out. People don't want to go on a 12-step call. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. I don't. You know? So what comes after the I don't want us? Poor me's. Pour me a drink. It just lines right up. When we offer love, we offer our life. Are you prepared to give your life for another person? Expecting nothing in return. When love is offered, God is there. Can we receive him? Have we received him? Have we found God in our seeking to be able to share him with somebody else? That's the real key. Well, the will to love is God's will. Have we taken the third step? We want to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. What he's really asking us to do is love other people. be working for other people, be servants for other people. That's the real deal, you know. Because we say our will, we want to turn our will and our life over. It's still selfish. We really want to be a servant for God. Just twist that a little bit and look at the end result, and you can answer that question about your third step. I want to read an email exchange between a guy that I had over in Ukraine. It's a Russian guy by the name of Nick. He reached out to me. He heard an old tape of mine, and he asked me a question. And it was one of the greatest questions I've heard in a long time. He asked me, my response was, Nick, great question. He was asking the difference, let me even put it on here. What's the difference between being kind and loving? Because he was working on his forgiveness prayers. He wanted to be kind and he also wanted to be loving. He's like, okay, what's the difference? The translation wasn't making sense to him. So this is what I wrote. Nick, great question. I've got guys here in A who speak English but who have never bothered to ask this question. Most people think they know the difference, but until they study the differences, they never realize that they were mixing up words. Especially because people often tend to be kind and loving simultaneously, but they are different due to the emotional underlying words. Because of the translation issues for you to get this into Russian, I'm going to explain in some detail to be sure you understand the difference. They are similar because they can be part of love. To be kind is to share with others a friendly, generous, or considerate nature. To be nice and pleasant in a positive way and to care about the other person. To be loving is intense caring and compassion. There is a strong underlying emotion which bonds us to the other person emotionally, like a child has for a parent. An intense feeling of deep affection which directs our actions to the other person. Here's an example of both. You're walking down the street and you see an old woman drop her packages all over the ground. When you stop to help her pick them up, it is a very kind thing to do. You are just being nice because it's the right thing to do. Now imagine the exact same situation, but the old person is your grandmother who has dropped the package. Not only do you eagerly stop to help her, but you also comfort her because you love her in your heart and you have affection for her. Her trouble triggers a deep affection within you. You are emotionally charged and you eagerly want to help her out of compassion. Your actions are now emotionally charged and you feel her distress because you want her to feel better. So you say something like, "It's okay, Grandma, don't worry about it. I'll help you clean up the mess. I'll get those. Here, let me help you home with those packages. It's so good to see you today." Your heart goes out to her because of her moment of need. Why the different reactions? Because with your grandmother, there is an underlying emotion which adds meaning to your actions much more than when you were just being kind. Now, we talk about love. We have to be careful. There are several different kinds of love, and people very often misuse the words by applying the wrong meaning. Here's what I mean. Love also has some other meanings. If you go back to the Greek root of the word, there are 4 types of love. Philo, which is friendship love. It includes loyalty to friends, community, and requires virtue and familiarity. Storge is the love between exceptional friends, the desire for them to care compassionately for one another, the kind of love that 2 best friends share, deep, non-sexual, emotional connection. Eros, which is a passionate love with sensual desire and longing, the kind of love a man should have for his wife, which includes deep intimacy. And agape, true sacrificial love. This type of love is from and can only be found in the presence of God. The Bible says God is love, and this is what they mean: to care so completely about another person that you would sacrifice everything for that person, expecting nothing in return. Complete selflessness and sacrificial love. So if I say I love my new car, what am I saying? How about I love rock and roll? Or I tell my mother I love you. How is that different from me telling my wife I love you? Or when I tell God I love you? I'm using the same word, but in each instant it has a very, very different and unique meaning. I think it's critically important to know the difference. Thanks for the great question, Dave. My dear friend Dave, he responded back to me. I'm so thankful for your help. I am so thankful for JR's recording to me. It touched me. I'm so thankful for the 12 on 12, meaning the 12 prayers and 12 meditations that he taught him. Several last day, I said I love you to my parents and my sister. And 15 minutes ago, my father said to me, I love you. It's amazing how love can change people. It is hard for me to remember that my dad said this word, I love you. He said it only as an answer when I said it to him. But 15 minutes ago, he said it himself. I hope you understand what I tried to explain. Send you my smile, Nick. That's what love is. Here's a kid, drug-addicted, alcoholic kid from the Ukraine. We don't speak the same language. We connect over the internet. I had never seen him. I take him through the work in the Big Book. I teach him the 12 prayers and meditation. He starts practicing patience, tolerance, kindness, and love with his mom and dad. And his dad says, I love you. For somebody who grew up without ever hearing their father say, I love you, you'll understand exactly why I'm getting emotional. It's powerful, powerful stuff. It's free. It's available to us all. We have to start the ball rolling with forgiveness. That's the deal. My buddy Mark. To love unconditionally is to say go in peace when somebody says I'm leaving you. I got in a fight with my wife years ago, and I picked up the phone and I called Mark because she was loading the kid in the car. She said, I'm leaving you. I'm done. I've had it with you. I said, Mark, what do I do? He says, do you think she's going to hurt the kids? And I said, no, she loves those kids. He says, then you say one thing and one thing only. You say, I love you, go in peace. I said, doesn't sound right, but okay. I went downstairs and I said, you know what, honey, I can't stop you. I love you. I don't want you to leave. But if you feel the need to go in peace. She left the house. She was madder than hell. She wanted me to fight. She came back about a half an hour later and we had a nice conversation. We figured out what the issue was. I wasn't meeting her emotional needs. And so she felt like she had another thing to do. She was trying to get my attention. If I had fought her at that moment and said, I love you, go in peace, instead if I had said, you're not going anywhere with my kids and took them that tack, I don't think I'd be married today. You know? It's very powerful. When you bring love into any kind of equation, the problem, it just dissolves. It's so, so powerful. I highly encourage you to seek it. That's the 4 absolutes. I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to come here and share with you. I wish I had more time. There's so much more. I wrote a presentation on the second step proposition, which I'm going to post on the web. It's in your notes. I also posted a thing in your notes that's on the sex ideal. There's 5 inventories that the Big Book gives us. There's the resentment inventory. There's the fear inventory. There's a 9-question sex inventory. There's a sex ideal. And then there's a harms to others inventory. A lot of people go, sex ideal, what are you talking about? I've never heard about a sex ideal. It's crucially important. When you answer those 9 questions, and you'll see it in the guide, and I want to post that on the web as well, the PowerPoints that go with it, that you can learn about it. We answer these 9 questions, and you don't need to go have another negative relationship to learn. You've already paid for your past negative relationships. Let's learn from them. For example, in my own life, every time I met a girl, I jumped into bed on the first date, if that's what I was going for, right? And it always turned into a train wreck. So my ideal read, someone with whom I won't jump into bed on the first date. I just took the negative and turned it into a positive. If having something in common with a person turned out to be a good thing in the relationship, it transitions straight across to an ideal. Somebody with whom I have something in common. So you can use your experience from the past to have a game plan for your future relationships. Right? Now you go in and you meet this person. And you love at first sight across the room, and you go over there and you approach them, and you get your first date. Now you sit down and you go, do they meet my ideal? If they don't meet your ideal, cancel the date. There's ulterior motives there. But if they meet the majority of your ideal, now you know that this has a chance. If I practice patience, tolerance, kindness, and love, and use the 4 absolutes, let's see how this thing goes. It's not just what you want to get out of a relationship. It's what you want to bring to the relationship. In your package, there's a real ideal. It's one of my ideals from an old inventory from maybe 20 years ago. It's 12-piece ideal. That ideal has mushroomed now, and it doesn't even fit on 2 pages. My ideal has gotten bigger and bigger because I want to bring more and more and more into my relationship. Right? What I want out of a relationship is selfish. What am I bringing to the relationship? If I want a great relationship, I have to be sacrificial. And you want a spiritual test, I'll give you a spiritual test, and this is hardcore recovery, guys. This is advanced AA. I do not suggest it for the faint of heart. every 6 months I do inventory, right? I said I write every January, every June. I write a new ideal every January, every June. I write this ideal. I take that ideal and I give it to my wife. I say, hey, honey, this is the man that I want to be in our relationship, and I give it to her. I let her read it. She doesn't get to comment on it. It's between me and God, right? She reads that ideal, and then I start to live it. At the 3-month mark, we have what we call the state of the state. I go back and I sit down with her and I say, hey, honey, how am I doing? And trust me, boys, she'll tell you how you're doing. It can be painful. It can be painful. I did that right after I broke my back and I was going through losing my identity as a pilot, and I threw myself the harder into what I knew. I was doing 12-step calls and I was doing a lot of AA work, and I went to my wife and said, hey, honey, how am I doing? And she started to cry. She said, you've hurt me more in the last few months than you've ever hurt me in my entire life. You could have pushed me over with a feather. I thought I was doing fantastic. I'm working the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, the 12 concepts. I'm helping other people. I'd missed the mark. I'd left a widow at home. I was so busy helping other people, I wasn't meeting her needs. And she was crying out to me saying, would you please spend time with me? And I was too busy focusing on trying to get rid of my own burdens, because I threw myself the harder into helping others and left my wife alone. What she was saying was, I want your time. So I threw myself into my relationship, and I spent almost 2 full years studying relationships to try to be the best husband I can be. And my ideal is no longer 12 bullet statements. It's now like 47 bullet statements. Because I raised the bar so much higher than what it means for me to be a God-centered man in my relationship with my bride. You know? It is so freeing. Because she's not just my wife, she's my best friend. She's my lover, she's my support. She is. She's the deal. She's a gift. I talk about her sometimes like she's a burden. You know, she's a pain in my ass. She did this, she did that. That's my ego talking. When I really look at it, I could not be here helping you guys if she wasn't holding the fort down back in Texas. I thank her profusely. Because of her, I'm able to carry the message to so many people. Couldn't do it without her. What a difference in perspective for a selfish alcoholic. You know? My heart to you guys, I thank you so much. There's an expression that certain religions use, and they use a word called namaste. And one of the translations is, the God in me recognizes the God in you. Hopefully, what you guys have experienced up here is me being transparent. Just because I got a bunch of time in the program, I am flawed, warts and all. As you know, you heard me, I swear sometimes. I'm not by any shape of the imagination preaching to you from a spiritual hilltop. I screw up regularly. This monkey falls out of the tree quite often. But come walk life with me and you'll see that I pick myself up, I dust myself off, I shine the sunlight of the Spirit, because how free do I want to be? Emmett Fox wrote an essay about, you can go to the ocean with a thimble and you get a thimble full of water. Man, I'm driving to the ocean with the biggest semi you've ever seen, because I want as much spirit as I can get. I want this deal. I love life. I love people. As big a pain in the ass as you guys can be at times, you're the greatest gift. Helping another alcoholic, there's nothing better than taking somebody that's shaking and twitching through this work, and a month later you walk into your home group and you're in the corridor with another newcomer carrying the message. The trick is you cannot take any credit whatsoever. That wasn't you. That was God. He gave you a front row seat to the coolest ride on earth. Please don't miss this opportunity. Help somebody else and you will be so free. It's the greatest ride on earth. Thank you.